a Russian railway, a North American concrete block manufacturer, a European jewellery firm. What do you think they have in common?
I'm sure you can think of many commonalities, but the one I would like to focus on is one that every organization in the whole world shares, and that is that every organization needs suppliers. No organization can survive without suppliers, and the management of this supply function is what this video will be all about.
One way any organization, public or private, can be represented is as part of a chain as shown in this diagram. What makes real life more complex is that some customers may also be suppliers, and then a dual trading relationship exists. For example, a bank may sell its services to a computer manufacturer, which in turn supplies the bank with hardware and software. A different way to look at the same issue is to think of any organization simply as an input-output transformation system. It's not difficult to appreciate that the management of the input side is highly relevant to the success of the total system.
An easy parallel exists for the human body. Our inputs are what we eat, drink, breathe, see, feel, and hear. We spend a lot of time ensuring that these inputs fit our needs. The supply function in an organization can contribute substantially to organizational objectives and strategy if it is well organized and managed. How to make sure this function contributes effectively is a challenge for supply managers as well as to the top management in any public or private organization. Realization that specialized expertise and top management attention may be necessary to obtain most benefits from the supply function has been slower in coming than might at first be expected. For example, accounting and marketing, which represents the mirror image to the supply function, enjoyed substantial management attention and academic interest for a longer period.
The two world wars, difficult economic times, shortages and overages of critical materials have served as reminders that lack of attention to the supply area can be extremely costly to an organization.
Unfortunately, these learning periods have reinforced the negative rather than the positive side of supply. Obviously, neglect in input management, as in any other management area, will result in painful experiences. But it is not simply the avoidance of pain that calls for management attention in supply. It is the attainment of opportunities not yet claimed that represents the exciting potential of supply.
And interestingly enough, the realization that customer satisfaction and quality customer service are essential to the prospering of any organization has also changed management's perspective on how suppliers and effective supply management can help in keeping and attracting customers. For example, more than 60% of Jaguar's quality problems in the early 1980s could be traced back directly to suppliers. Switching to a German ignition system gave new Jaguar owners the pleasant sensation of a car that would actually start when the ignition key was turned on. There are two perspectives on the supply side, the operational and the strategic. The communication lines of supply reach into every part of every organization, even if requirements are as simple as pens and paper. Ensuring that all the needs of the whole organization are met in terms of quality, quantity, delivery, cost, service, and continuity has traditionally required a tremendous amount of time and effort.
Almost invariably, changes in plans and problems in the market create last-minute hassles. Thus, for supply managers, keeping up with organizational expectations is a daily grind, in which long-term thinking is difficult to encourage. Moreover, significant problems are created for others in the organization, users or requisitioners, when their requirements are not fully met.
Faulty materials, too large or too small quantities, late deliveries, high costs, inadequate service, and lack of continuity can all cause serious problems in certain areas of the organization. It's small wonder that many supply managers see as their prime objective the avoidance of these kinds of troubles. They consider themselves and their staff to be overworked and unappreciated. This is not exactly a prime environment to encourage long-term, opportunistic and strategic thinking. There is another side to supply. This is the opportunistic, contribution or profit maximizing, strategic side. Supply is continually exposed to the needs of the organization on the one hand and on the other to the marketplace. Therefore, it occupies a unique niche from which to identify opportunities for the organization which may not be apparent to others.
In everything that follows, the starting assumption will be that both perspectives are important and necessary to ensure that suppliers and the supply function will help our organization be successful. In relation to organizational objectives and strategy, the supply function can occupy three different positions.
At its worst, supply can be a negative factor in the sense that it prevents the achievement of objectives and thwarts strategies. In the negative stage, the supply function is looked upon largely as a clerical function. Key decisions are made in the organization without due regard to the supply side.
For example, marketing plans ignore supply considerations such as availability and quality. New product introductions are planned and specifications drawn without supplier input, resulting in high costs or poor quality. Typical of the negative stage is sub-optimizing behavior, in which each department in the supply chain makes its own decisions in ignorance of the overall impact. The supply department may buy in large quantities to get a good price, without due consideration of the inventory impact. Quality assurance considerations are solely the responsibility of the quality assurance group and surface only after specifications have been frozen and vendors selected. There never seems to be enough time to do things right, and in the ensuing frustration, avoidance of blame is a key concern for the various parties involved.
In the negative stage, there tends to be great concern over departmental territorial prerogatives. Vendor selection and commercial concerns are my responsibility. Accounting looks after payment. And engineering is totally responsible for specifications. Other typical comments include, "This is my budget and I can spend it any way I like." And "It's too late to change anything now. Marketing says this is the only way to go." Top management's perspective of supply in the negative stage is that supply is a bureaucratic necessity to prevent fraud and must be staffed at minimum cost. In other words, top management's involvement is inadequate.
Dwelling on the negative stage is unpleasant, but not uncommon. Unfortunately, once an organization is mired in negative practices, considerable effort is necessary to lift it to a higher stage.
In our earlier words, in the negative stage, the operational side and trouble avoidance is mismanaged.
Frequently, the standard solution is to replace the persons in the supply function with others who can do the job better.
In the neutral stage, supply is neither an obstruction nor an asset in the setting and achievement of organizational objectives and strategies. In the neutral stage, the undesirable aspects of the negative side have been addressed and eliminated. Frequently, the organization has gone to a materials management type of supply function, in which purchasing, traffic, materials handling, inventory control, production planning and scheduling, receiving, and possibly quality control all report to a materials manager.
Thus, at least the most obvious undesirable trade-offs within the supply area itself can be addressed. Early involvement of the supply function and suppliers in new product or service development is not necessarily guaranteed, however, and supply considerations are not considered relevant in corporate strategy formulation, other than in a trouble avoidance context.
Many organizations currently seem to be in this neutral stage. Few managers outside the supply function, and not all that many in the function itself, are aware that opportunities exist to do significantly better by moving to the positive stage. Top management involvement is just sufficient to avoid significant supply problems. In our earlier language, the operational side of supply is handled satisfactorily when an organization is at the neutral stage. In the positive stage, suppliers and the supply function are contributors to the planning, setting, and achievement of organizational objectives and strategies. In the positive stage, supply is part of the competitive edge and of extensive top management concern.
In fact, supply is fully integrated into the whole organization. Supply considerations are properly weighed by the other functional areas in the organization, such as research and development, engineering, operations, finance, MIS, accounting, human resources, and marketing. This positive stage requires not only that the supply function is staffed with high-quality personnel capable of identifying and exploiting major supply opportunities, but also that the other functions in the organization can and do support these efforts.
The greatest contribution potential for supply stems from early involvement in the development of new projects, products, services, and organizational strategies. Teamwork, consultation, coordination, and cooperation. These are the words that describe supply involvement in the positive stage. It is probably much easier to slide back from the positive to the neutral stage than to move from the neutral to the positive, or to sustain a positive stage. Top management's efforts to assist the whole organization to achieve synergy will be vital in this positive stage. In our earlier language, in the positive stage, both the operational and strategic perspectives on supply are met. Let me give an example here. At Procter & Gamble, packaging purchases totaled about $50 million per year, and 13 different suppliers were used. Getting a new package developed took about 18 weeks. Faced with a proposal from marketing to introduce some 60 new packages in the following year, it was decided that a new approach was necessary. A very close examination of the capabilities of all 13 suppliers showed that 3 suppliers were clearly superior, one of which was an excellent source. By working very closely with these 3 suppliers, it was not only possible to improve price by about 10%, but also to reduce lead time to 2 weeks. Shortly thereafter, news reached the company that a competitor intended to introduce a new product similar to one that research and development had been working on at Procter & Gamble. By bringing this product on the market faster than originally planned, Procter & Gamble was able to improve market share by at least 25%, and sales increased by about $80 million for the next 9 months. Improved supply capability allowed Procter & Gamble to be more competitive. Supply benefits from this example came not only from the $5 or $6 million in lower packaging costs, but also from the reduced lead time to bring new products to market.
This is an appropriate place to review briefly just exactly what effective management of supply does have to offer in terms of direct and indirect bottom line impact. In almost every organization, public or private, the supply function can significantly affect the bottom line. Thanks.
In the first place, the supply of goods and services to the organization may require a substantial percentage of the total budget or revenue of the organization. Very few organizations, public or private, spend less than about 20 or 30% of their total budget or revenue on the acquisition of goods and services from outside suppliers. For manufacturers in Europe, the average is over 60% of total revenue. Moreover, savings achieved in supply flow directly to the bottom line. For a typical manufacturer, a 5% overall saving in supply dollars may increase profits by 40%, and a 5% savings target in supply dollars is not unrealistic.
Typically, the cost of operating and staffing the supply function is a small fraction, traditionally in the 2 to 4% range, of what is spent by supply for purchases. It is therefore somewhat surprising that in some organizations, the emphasis is on minimizing the supply department's budget rather than the total dollars spent through supply. Trying to save money on supply management often increases substantially the total amount paid to suppliers. On the other hand, it is not at all unusual to find that a few extra dollars spent to improve the supply function can save substantially in the amount paid to suppliers.
Supply's impact on the bottom line can be both direct and indirect. The most obvious direct impact is in terms of prices paid. If, without any change in specifications, quality, quantity or delivery, the price or the laid-down cost for an acquired product or service can be lowered, the resulting saving goes directly to the bottom line.
Similarly, total ownership cost can be reduced by switching to a substitute, which represents better value over the full life of the acquired item. Most supply managers fully recognize this direct form of contribution.
The indirect bottom line impact of supply comes from the enhancement of the competitive edge of the organization through better quality, faster delivery, greater flexibility, better customer service, improved employee morale, or new technology.
Of course, it is difficult to estimate the exact amount of indirect impact, but it should exceed the direct savings potential in price reduction as shown in the Procter & Gamble example. the topic of supply or purchasing strategy is becoming better recognized, although in fact, supply strategies have existed for a very long time.
It's not unusual for a steel company to own an iron ore mine or a coal mine. Vertical integration backward into supply sources has long been recognized as one way of expansion open to certain firms and certain industries. The idea that strategy is tailor-made for a specific procurement situation is a fundamental proposition. The key question really is, how can the supply function and the suppliers contribute effectively to organizational objectives and strategy? And its companion, how can organizational objectives and strategies reflect opportunities and strengths in the supply area? The ideal internal situation would be this one. Ideally, supply objectives should be congruent with supply strategy, and each in turn should be congruent with organizational objectives and organizational strategy. Although this diagram makes a lot of sense, it's difficult to achieve in reality. In the first place, because it presupposes that organizational objectives are clearly identified and well known to everyone within the organization. The same applies to organizational strategy. This represents a tall order.
The problem is that in the absence of such understanding, supply managers will start to substitute their own personal preferences. For example, they may seek a low-cost supplier when quality should be the highest priority.
The external side of supply strategy is supplied in this diagram. It shows supply strategy as matching current organizational needs to current market conditions and future needs to future market conditions. Since both needs and market conditions are likely to change over time, continued reassessment of the effectiveness of certain supply strategies is crucial. Supply strategy must therefore be congruent internally with the needs of the organization and externally with the realities of current and future markets. Overlapping the internal and external sides of supply shows the complexity of determining supply strategies which are both internally and externally congruent. For example, top management in a plastic product manufacturing company created a 5-year plan calling for major volume and market share growth. The reality of the plastic resin market was a severe shortage of the raw materials necessary to make the pipe, preventing the achievement of the desired growth. Earlier consideration of the potential supply problem might have allowed the company to find ways and means of avoiding the shortage.
Let us now turn to the elements that make up the supply strategy, or since supply is the reverse image of marketing, the supply mix.
The various building blocks of a supply strategy are what, how much, who, when, what price, where, and how. What to buy is the first component of supply strategy, and the make or buy decision is the single most important strategic supply decision made in any organization.
To determine what to make in-house, it is wise for a company to determine where it can add the greatest value in-house compared to what suppliers can provide. Unfortunately, once the make decision has been implemented, it is often difficult to reverse, and there may not be any pressure to review the wisdom of past make decisions in the light of new market realities.
In the last decade in North America, a tendency towards the buying of services appears to be emerging. In both public and private organizations, the contracting of services such as security, food, office, building and equipment maintenance, computer programming, data processing, engineering, and legal and accounting work appears to be the trend. The use of limited term contracts for various professional services may be attractive.
Also, on the manufacturing side, the buy option is receiving more attention, allowing companies to concentrate on their core business. The make or buy question is particularly challenging for multi-unit, multi-divisional organizations in which certain units or divisions could be suppliers to others. The question of total corporate benefit versus unit profitability or performance needs to be examined with great care. Transfer pricing of trade between units is often a contentious issue. In multinational corporations, additional concerns in inter-unit trade center on tariffs, currency exchange, and political and tax issues.
Once the major decisions have been taken regarding make or buy, a breakdown of purchases into categories or niches is useful for proper supply management. Most manufacturing organizations recognize different categories of purchases: raw materials, purchased parts, maintenance, repair and operating MRO supplies, capital equipment, resale items and services.
Frequently, the supply department is subdivided into sections, each specializing in one of these categories. Specialized expertise is required for each type of purchasing.
Raw material supply often involves large volume contracts, a thorough knowledge of primary processes, and high sensitivity to economics and the world supply situation.
A buyer of raw materials is likely to specialize in relatively few items and should have a substantial amount of purchasing experience before being assigned to this task.
By contrast, MRO supplies are often assigned to inexperienced buyers because there are a large number of relatively small value items that are ordered repeatedly and often are sole sourced. Even in this category, items such as cleaning supplies, toweling, light bulbs and so on would be seen as requiring less expertise than repair parts for production equipment. Resale items require a good feel for what the market may demand. Types of purchases may be further divided depending on whether they are repetitive or not.
For repetitive purchases, special care may be taken to ensure that a repeatable system of acquisition is designed. Ad hoc solutions have to be found for non-repetitive items.
A further division should be made according to the money spent on each type of purchase. In most modern organizations, the total number of individual items acquired can be very large. For example, the total number of different line items going into the construction of an airplane exceeds 100,000. Clearly, this number presents a tremendous acquisition problem. When viewed from a management perspective, it would not be wise to treat all items equally or acquire them by the same system. One way to categorize total purchases is by dividing them according to the total dollar volume spent on each line item for a year. The ABC breakdown would then break total purchases into three categories. A items would normally represent about 10% of the total number of items acquired, but would account for about 70% of the total dollar volume.
A items represent the greatest opportunity for improving direct and indirect bottom line impact. The price paid for A items deserves a lot of attention and careful scrutiny. Constant alertness is required to market opportunities, substitutes, new technologies, etc., to ensure the buyer is receiving the best value possible on A purchases. Special delivery arrangements may have to be made for A items because holding them in inventory represents too large a drain on working capital.
B items would represent about 20% of the total number of items and about 20% of the total dollar volume. B requirements are still significant in financial impact, although less so than A items. They lend themselves well to standard inventory and ordering systems. C items, 70% of the total number, account for approximately 10% of the total annual dollar volume. Since each of the three classes of items is important to the continuing functioning of the total organization, availability of all must be assured. C items, however, can be safely stocked in sufficient quantities to avoid worrying about running out. It is also possible to categorize individual classes of purchases by the ABC concept. For example, raw materials, purchased parts, equipment, MRO supplies, resale items and services can all be subclassified into A, B and C items. Thus, if the ABC concept is combined with type of purchases and whether acquisition is repetitive or not, a three-dimensional block is created. The types of purchases are on the X-axis and the ABC division on the Y-axis, with the repetitive, non-repetitive division forming the Z-axis. Such a combination would identify 36 different subsets, each of which should require specialized purchasing treatment. For example, in the packaging example for Procter & Gamble referred to earlier, packaging at $50 million per year represented an A requirement, repetitive, in the purchased part category. The assignment of a skilled and experienced buyer with good analytical and negotiation skills to this category alone was a sound management decision. An expensive review of 16 suppliers to determine their capability in terms of quality, price, and delivery could easily be justified, and the final result of packaging cost savings of about $5 million per year and delivery improvement from 18 to 2 weeks clearly had a major direct and indirect bottom line impact. By contrast, in the same firm, the acquisition of a pointer for the blackboard in the conference room represented a C requirement, non-repetitive, in the supplies category and was handled by telephone by the assistant of the Director of Human Resources.
This categorization or niching of purchases finds a parallel on the marketing side, where niches and niche strategies are a standard way of classifying and addressing markets.
After the what decision, how much to buy is the second component of purchasing strategy. How much should be bought at any one time has tremendous implications for inventory control. The old-fashioned view was that quantity discounts might be obtained only if one purchased very large requirements at a time. This often led to substantial inventory investment.
The more modern view leans toward taking very small deliveries at a time, just enough to meet current requirements, but to try to obtain price advantages through longer-term and quantity commitments. The term just-in-time is often applied to this philosophy, which recognizes that benefits accrue to the seller from a long-term total volume commitment, even if individual deliveries are relatively small. Lot sizing decisions are relevant to both buyer and seller, and frequently cost reduction opportunities may be found for both if more frequent or more accurate information is shared by buyer and seller.
The third purchasing strategy component deals with who should buy.
To have clout and expertise, the buying function should be centralized, and highly qualified people who understand markets, technology and costing, and who are inquisitive and persuasive are necessary to challenge the status quo. Without qualified staff, the function can perform little more than clerical routines. Top management involvement is essential in supply strategy formulation and execution.
The fourth purchasing strategy component concerns timing.
When to buy has major implications for delivery performance and also for cash planning. For commodities, the decision whether to forward buy or not may be the only option of influencing the price paid.
The idea of lead time, or how much time a supplier needs from the receipt of an order to the moment of delivery, is very much part of the when question. If the buyer wishes to purchase faster than normal lead time allows, a premium price is usually charged. Lead times often change and tend to lengthen as the market changes to a seller's market, and contract at the onset of a buyer's market. Familiarity with lead times and internal planning horizons is essential to assurance of on-time supply. The fifth component of purchasing strategy deals with price.
It is possible for an organization to develop a specific price strategy. An organization may deliberately decide to pay premium prices, but to expect outstanding supplier performance on other counts. Some organizations may set their price target at market standard. Others may wish to have extremely aggressive price expectations.
The three major approaches to price determination are cost-based, market-based, and competition-based. One supply strategy is to pursue a cost-based approach wherever possible.
The assumption here is that the purchaser would be sufficiently familiar with the cost of producing the material, product or service in question so as to be able to negotiate a reasonable price based on anticipated cost. A vendor would be told what cost-based price has to be met, and failure to agree on a specific price target would remove the supplier from further consideration. Such a cost-based strategy would require a number of skilled purchasing analysts, extensive engineering and accounting support, and strong negotiation skills.
A manufacturer of large-screen video projectors uses this strategy. Since the purchaser has just as much information as the supplier on the technology and the various costs of manufacture, the idea that this purchaser might make rather than purchase the product is an ever-present one with a cost-based strategy. Market-based supply strategies recognize that the price is set by factors beyond the purchaser's or vendor's control.
A typical example is when prices are set by government decree. Other examples would include prices for commodities where no vendor or purchaser is so large to unduly influence market price. Under these circumstances, only the decision of when to buy may have an impact on the actual price paid. Also, it might be possible to negotiate for extra services without changing the price.
Another supply strategy for price may be competition-based. The assumption here is that sufficient competition exists to establish a competitive price. Vendors are asked to bid on an organization's requirements. Presumably, the hungriest vendor wins the contract. Most governments prefer to use this approach.
Certain organizational constraints or vendor marketing practices may make it impossible for a purchaser to pursue a preferred price strategy for a particular product or service. Therefore, it's probably proper to talk in terms of leaning in a certain direction, rather than implying that the purchaser has completely free choice to pursue one strategy or another. If goods are priced on a market-based philosophy, the purchaser's options are clearly limited. The major choice facing the purchaser, therefore, is whether to lean towards a cost-based strategy or a competition-based one.
The cost-based strategy is the more sophisticated approach and makes more sense for A requirements than C requirements. The sixth component of purchasing strategy deals with the location, size, and number of suppliers.
also has strategic implications. A first cut is geographical. Should the organization purchase locally or regionally? Frequently, the local business community has a ready answer to this question. Managers are often exposed to considerable pressure to purchase from local suppliers, and of course, it makes sense to buy locally if good value can be obtained. On a larger scale, the question evolves to whether to purchase domestically or internationally. This is an issue of interest to governments as well, because it affects imports and balance of payments. A different dimension of the where question concerns the size of suppliers. Should the organization seek out large or small suppliers, and for what reasons?
For A requirements, large suppliers normally make the most sense, but for B and C items, medium and small suppliers are often preferable.
A different dimension again involves multiple versus single sourcing. W. E. Deming, the expert on quality whom the Japanese revere, argues that the best quality supplier must also be the lowest cost producer. Moreover, it is very difficult for two suppliers to provide totally equivalent quality. Therefore, he strongly favors working with single sources for specific product niches. The growing trend to look at suppliers as partners also favors working with fewer vendors on longer-term contracts for specific product niches. The proponents of multiple sourcing argue that supply assurance is threatened by dependence on single sourcing, and that the single source will not stay price competitive over time. Obviously, this latter group favors the competition-based approach to pricing, and the single sourcers favor the cost-based approach. I believe that single sourcing only makes sense if the single source is a clearly superior supplier. Moreover, the purchaser must fully understand how to deal effectively with such a preferred supplier and be capable of assuring that long-term value will be forthcoming.
The seventh and last component of purchasing strategy deals with the choice of acquisition process or how the requirements will be purchased. A simplified acquisition process for a one-time requirement that has not been purchased before consists of the following 6 steps: recognition of need, description of need, identification of potential suppliers, supplier selection, receipt and inspection, payment and record maintenance. It's useful to recognize that the opportunity for adding value to the process reduces substantially as this sequence moves from need recognition to payment.
There are literally dozens of supply tools and techniques which have been designed to deal with specific purchase niches and to assure certain supply objectives are met. Obviously, time constraints prevent mention of these here. The booklet accompanying this tape identifies 18 tools and techniques useful in adding value in supply.
At this stage, I would like to mention only 2 of these 18 because they are both powerful and occur at the need recognition and description stages, where the opportunity for improving value is the greatest. The first is value analysis. During World War II, a curious phenomenon occurred. Shortages of parts and materials were common in the industrial world. Many items were considered vital to the military effort and others were simply not available. When such shortages did occur, the solution found, whether it involved redesign or a substitute part or material, often represented an improvement on the original design, part, or material specified.
When we have no choice but to take action on a procurement problem, we are forced to re-examine the basic need and the various ways in which this need can be satisfactorily met. Such a systematic approach to need definition and its satisfaction almost invariably yields better results than the original design or specification. This systematic approach was called value analysis. Subsequently, the term value engineering was coined to describe the application of the value analysis techniques to new designs, and value analysis described the application to existing purchases. Value analysis and value engineering can improve value in many ways, and cost reductions of up to 90% are possible.
The second technique to add value to the supply process is standardization and simplification.
The terms standardization and simplification are often used to mean the same thing. Strictly speaking, they refer to two different ideas. Standardization means agreement on definite sizes, design, quality, and the like. It is essentially a technical and engineering concept. Simplification refers to a reduction in the number of sizes, designs, and so forth. It is selective and a commercial problem, an attempt to determine the most important sizes, for instance, of a product and to concentrate purchases on these wherever possible.
An electronics manufacturer bought about 4,500 different capacitors from about 40 different suppliers at a total cost of about $40 million. A special commodity team composed of engineers, purchasing and quality control specialists, and production representatives from various divisions worked on this purchasing niche for about 2 years. The end result, standardization and simplification from 4,500 to 400 capacitors, a reduction in cost of about $5 million, a reduction in suppliers from 40 to 6, and a reduction in lead time of up to 6 months, which improved new product introduction time significantly.
Now, some discussion is necessary as to what constitutes a good supplier. The supplier selection decision has traditionally been seen as the key in sound supply management. Presumably, the right supplier will make sure that the customer receives exactly what is required. Therefore, time and effort spent on locating the right source will be fully justified in the return.
What is a good supplier? A good supplier lives up to the deal made with respect to quality, quantity, delivery, cost, and service.
A better supplier goes well beyond this minimum, taking the initiative to suggest ways and means whereby the customer can improve products, services, and processes. An exceptional supplier places the customer's needs first and is in tune with the long-range objectives and strategies of the customer. The exceptional supplier has the mission to make customers prosper. Good, better, and exceptional suppliers are scarce. Therefore, supply management can be called the battle for good suppliers.
If a good supplier is found, it is wise for the customer to value the relationship. Every supplier switch is costly. Every new supplier needs to be evaluated, tested for quality, new personal contacts need to be built, details need to be worked out on delivery, packaging, ordering, payment, inspection arrangements, etc.
The support of exceptional suppliers allows an organization to undertake its programs and strategies with even greater confidence. That is why a number of firms are experimenting with supplier partnerships. To a large extent, suppliers are only as good as they have to be. Therefore, if the demands placed on suppliers are not exacting, it is possible for suppliers to survive with relatively mediocre performance. It is interesting that many supply managers believe a supplier is good when it delivers on time. In fact, the term great service has come to mean on-time delivery and a fair price. We deserve the suppliers we have because we've not asked for more. There is a way in which the battle for good suppliers can be won. Good, better, and exceptional suppliers can be created over time using reverse marketing.
There are two different views of the buyer-supplier relationship, the traditional and the reverse marketing view. In the traditional view, the purchaser's role is seen as selecting the best supplier from those available. In reverse marketing, the emphasis is on creating suppliers to suit the purchaser's needs. In the traditional view of supply, the purchaser responds to the marketing efforts of current and potential suppliers. In reference to our earlier diagrams, the traditional view has trouble avoidance as its main perspective and, at best, achieves a neutral contribution to organizational objectives and strategy. Here the initiative is with the supplier, and there are excellent reasons for that. We know that the aggressor tends to have the upper hand, so the supplier's needs are foremost in plans and actions. Taking the initiative forces one to do one's homework. When the proposal is the supplier's, the purchaser is forced into a predetermined perspective and role.
Even though a sound marketing plan is supposed to be built on the satisfying of the customer's needs, it is always prepared with satisfaction of the supplier's needs as the primary objective. In reverse marketing, however, the purchaser's needs are the starting point. In reverse marketing, it is the purchaser who persuades the supplier to supply. My research has shown that purchasers tend to get surprisingly good results when they engage in reverse marketing, prodded on by the reality that they had no other choice. If reverse marketing works so well when the purchaser uses it out of necessity, why not use it when choices are available, as was the case in value analysis? Further research has shown that there is no need to restrict the use of reverse marketing to those instances of no choice. It works equally well at normal times.
Graphically, reverse marketing can be represented as the simple reversion of arrows from the traditional view, which produces a substantially different perspective. The purchaser, instead of being persuaded to buy, now tries to persuade the supplier to provide. The initiative is now with the purchaser. In reverse marketing, the focus is on the strategic side of supply and on the positive contribution to organizational objectives and strategy. In reverse marketing, the purchaser is aware that benefits will accrue to both the supplier and the purchaser, benefits of which the supplier may not be aware.
What I like about reverse marketing is that it permits the pursuit of the big bites. Big improvements in quality, price, delivery, and service are possible with reverse marketing. In the traditional relationship, the purchaser is only allowed to pursue those little bites and nibbles that the supplier permits as part of the standard selling game. However, in reverse marketing, the purchaser can go beyond these upper and lower control limits pre-established by the supplier and go for the really big gains. The reverse marketing process consists of 11 chronological phases, which are further described in the accompanying booklet. Now we need to see how these steps work in practice.
John Thomas, Vice President of Purchasing for the Malston Bakery, had become increasingly aware that bread making was caught in a cost-price squeeze that threatened the closure of the 3 bread bakeries. Although Malston also produced a large variety of other baking products, it had produced bread for over 100 years, and bread sales amounted to about $30 million. the price of wheat was government controlled and bread flour represented about 55% of total bread cost. Six mills supplied flour at identical prices, and all efforts by John Thomas over the years to secure a lower price for bread flour had been unsuccessful. He decided he should visit his six suppliers so as to get a better understanding of the milling process. These visits convinced John that the margin charged by mills was too high. He also learned that certain byproducts of the milling process were sold as feed for animals and provided extra income for the millers. One of Marston's other flour vendors, the Ross Mill, which supplied winter wheat flour for soft cakes and cookies, had recently changed ownership. The new owner recognized that he had to replace the old equipment in his mill and was discussing prospects of continued patronage with John Thomas. With the approval of his production and marketing colleagues, John Thomas saw an opportunity to have the Ross Mill supply both bread and cookie flour, and persuaded the new owner to purchase the appropriate equipment and guaranteed a minimum volume of 30% of bread flour requirements provided Marston's strict quality standards could be met. The end result? A 7% saving in flour costs, or almost $1 million per year, sufficient to keep Marston in the bread baking business. Now it's obvious that reverse marketing is only limited to the private sector, isn't it? Not so. Here is an example of how two government agencies combined to try reverse marketing the public way. John Howe of the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, was continually exploring ways of making the nation's fishing industry more efficient. He believed that containerization would improve fish quality by cutting down on the amount of fish handling. He found out that some Scandinavian countries had successfully experimented with fish containers, and he managed to import one container as a sample. He wanted to test the idea with an order of 1,000 containers, and using standard government channels received the order won by a large international plastics producer. These containers were damaged easily and lacked durability, but proved that the idea was sound. John next went to the General Services Administration, the procurement agency for the federal government, to talk with Alex Wheeland, who suggested a local supplier might be useful to allow experimentation with various design options John wanted to try. The original container producer was not anxious to change the design because the first 1,000 containers were standard for use in the automotive industry. A request for proposal was prepared by John Wheeland, asking suppliers to investigate the possibility of locating a plant in the coastal region, an area of high unemployment. Plastico, a domestic manufacturer, won this contract for 7,000 containers at $300 each, or the promise to build a new plant in the coastal region. John Howe kept making design changes, and Plastico also improved the design, so that by the time a follow-on contract of 3,000 more containers 1 year later was given to Plastico, the fourth generation of design had already emerged. 4 years later, Plastico received another contract for 3,000 containers on the understanding that its design would next go out for general bid. By that time, however, Plastico had added buoys, docks and boats to its product line for the coastal plant, reducing fish containers to about 5% of its total volume. The net result was a major improvement in fish quality, increasing revenue to the fishing industry, as well as a new competitive plastics manufacturer in an area of high unemployment. Of course, you say, this is fine for the big companies, but the small companies don't really have a chance to apply this. Well, how about the story of Mega Technologies and Paul Hill? Paul Hill was president and owner of Mega Technologies, a small shop specializing in machining of parts for automated packaging equipment for beer, shampoo and other consumer products. Paul was looking for ways to give his company a competitive edge. He knew his quality was superior to that of his competitors, but he also knew his line of products was incomplete, lacking cams and feed screws. He wanted to apply his considerable computer knowledge to develop new equipment which would leapfrog existing technology and lead to very flexible, high-quality equipment control with quick setup capability. He talked to all domestic machinery manufacturers, but all declined interest. All Hill could offer was his own technical expertise and the promise of the purchase of 2 machines, one to manufacture cams, the other feed screws, at a total cost of about $1,200,000. After 8 months of unsuccessfully trying to interest domestic manufacturers, Paul Hill had given up. However, the visit of a sales representative who mentioned that a German equipment manufacturer, Rohn AG, might be interested rekindled his hopes. He visited Rohn, but after several visits it became clear that Rohn lacked the necessary computer expertise. So Paul and Rohn sought out a large international computer firm to join them in the project. Not to belabor the point, it took 3 years to produce the first machine and 5 years to the end of the debugging period of the second machine. 7 years later, Mega had been able to triple its size and became the dominant player in its industry. Rohn AG managed to use the new technology in a whole family of new equipment which it sold to Volkswagen and Rolls-Royce, and the computer company had built part of its reputation on this successful development.
Incredible, you say. You're right. But if you think this is fantastic, try the test in the booklet with this tape and score yourself on your own insight into what suppliers and a sound supply organization can do for improving the competitive edge. If you score below 65, you better take another good look at this tape. If you score higher, good luck in your hunt for better suppliers.